So, um, okay, so today we're going to talk about extensions in the browser. And so I'm sure that some of you, if not all, most of you, use some kind of extensions in your browsers. Um, and I wonder if anyone could just take a crack at explaining what browser extensions are. I will pick
I can
somebody.
try.
Yeah, go ahead, Ramon.
So I think from what I understand, browser extensions are it extends the functionality of what the browser does, right? They're like plugins that you can code yourself or maybe use someone else's that kind of extend the functionality of maybe like a web page that you're viewing or maybe grab some other services and try to bring them together with the web page that you're viewing.
Yeah, so it's a way of extending the functionality of the browser. You actually can get quite a few different functionalities that aren't really available with regular web pages. You can use them to modify web pages. What are some common examples of browser extensions that people are using right now?
Ad blocker.
Yes, AdBlocker is an extension that many people use. If you're not using it, I highly suggest you use it. What other kind of extensions are people using?
Isn't Honey also a browser extension?
Yeah, Honey is a browser extension. Do you want to explain what that is for the uninitiated, Guillermo?
I believe, if I understood correctly, it's like it'll when you're like on Amazon or eBay or something like one of those like buying websites, it'll look up other prices for the same product and like on different websites, and then find you the cheapest one.
Yeah, so it's a utility that helps you look up like lower prices and also like coupon codes for different web pages. Orion, did you have one you wanted to mention?
Oh yeah, LastPass.
Yeah, so can you just explain what that is?
So it's like it stores a bunch of passwords and to any websites you like log into,
Yeah,
and you
so
can like access them on like your phone and any other place you have your extension. You just log in.
yeah, so LastPass, if it's like Dashlane, which is what I use, it has like an extension part as well as just like a general app.
Yeah.
So the extension is like what enables it to like input all the passwords into like the websites you're visiting, and then it's backed by like a web service and web app that you would run on like um, on your phone or something like that.
I also use something called Dark Reader, and it essentially modifies the HTML, I think, and makes everything not white and eye friendly.
Yeah, so you can also have extensions that modify the styling on your pages to either make them darker or to change them in whatever way. So yeah, so ad blocker is a pretty good example, like we mentioned. This is a screenshot of Dashlane, which is the password manager I use. I don't think I'm giving away the farm in terms of what I've put in this screenshot, but hopefully that's the case. So in this case, you can see oftentimes when you install these extensions, there's just these icons in the upper right-hand corner of your browser, which you can then click on and they bring up something you can interact with. And there's a bunch of other like fun extensions out there. This is one of my personal favorites, which you can use to prank your friends, which basically replaces every image on every web page with a image or GIF of Nicolas Cage. So there are a lot of fun extensions out there like that that maybe aren't useful but are potentially fun. Okay. So yeah, so browser extensions are these very powerful pieces of web code. They exist outside of websites, and they are sort of these applications that are running within the browser. And they have quite a bit of capabilities. They can enable us to directly modify like a user's web browsing experience. They can modify sites. They can read what data is being shown on sites. And they also enable us to bypass many of the security measures that are normally in place in browsers. So as I mentioned before, browsers have a lot of security things in place so that you can't potentially write some malicious piece of code that gets outside of the scope of your web page and potentially wrecks a person's computer or something like that. A lot of those security measures aren't necessarily applicable for extensions. I still don't know if you can directly read the file system with an extension, but you can do other things that websites can't, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Okay. So, and today we're going to discuss Chrome extensions in particular. All the examples we're going to show are from Chrome extensions, but other browsers are also supported, or also support extensions. Particularly Firefox supports their own flavor of extensions. I believe Edge and Opera actually support Chrome extensions now. So you can run extensions made for Chrome on those browsers as well, I believe. And they're going to have a similar type of functionality. So just to give you an idea of what an extension actually is in terms of the code that you write, generally it's just a directory that has some files in it that we use to program in the extension. Typically, we program extensions with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, like you would a web page. And then the directory, if you're just doing development, you can load a directory in the extensions management page, which I'm going to have Salim run a demo at the end of class if we have enough time. And he'll show you how you can load these up, or if we have a deployed extension, it's like a zip file that gets loaded up. Also, extensions can be deployed to like stores. So the Chrome Web Store is usually where you get extensions from that are already been developed by somebody else, and you can load them there. So we're going to talk about several different components of how these extensions work. First, we're going to start with this manifest file, which is sort of what defines the properties of the extension. We're going to talk about background scripts, the extension UI, how you create those, what are called content scripts, and finally, we'll talk about message passing. So, all right, so first, the manifest file. So as I mentioned before, manifest file is this file that is at the top level directory of your extension. It defines most of the parameters of your extension. It defines links to the different files that it's going to be using. And so this is just a JSON file with some specified parameters. So things like the name of the extension, what version of it, a description, what are the icons that represent represent your extension. So we can specify what's called a background script, which we're going to talk about what that is, as well as permissions. And this browser action. So we're going to sort of break down what these things are. So first, we'll talk about what the permissions are. Typically, the permissions, there's a whole list of different permissions which basically specify what different functionalities your browser or your extension can access. So the browser actually presents quite a few different APIs that extensions can use, but you have to specify which of those it's going to be accessing. Whenever you install an extension, generally it warns the user what it's capable of by articulating, by presenting them with like what it has permissions to do. Also, you can specify URLs. And so by specifying URLs, I believe that is specifying one, what domains that your extension can actually make requests to. So if you wanted to communicate with your own server, you could put the URL for your server there. It also specifies like what domains that your extension can inspect. So if there's a page open, if there's a tab open that's on this particular domain, then your extension can start messing around with that page. So as I mentioned, there's a whole bunch of different permissions here. You can look up some of those extensions here in this link, which you can access afterwards. But there are things like alarms, or you can access like the bookmarks that someone has set in the browser. You can look at their browsing history. You can look at their copy paste clipboard. There's a whole long list of different permissions that you can access with this, and there are APIs to go along with all of those. Okay. And there are many other manifest file options which are spelled out in this document that I linked here if you want to take a look at those. Again, I'm going to cover some of the core core manifest file options, but there are more than we can go through today. Okay, so background scripts. So background scripts get specified in the manifest file here. So you just basically have a property background. There's some options that you can pick here about whether or not it's persistent or that kind of thing. And then you can specify which JavaScript files in your extension get loaded as the background script. So particularly background scripts are these event-driven pages, for lack of a better word, that run in the background of your browser for your extension. They are not associated with any particular tab or web page. It's basically just the background code that is running to drive your extension. So within that, within the background script, you can listen for events like this one. So this is an event, this chrome.runtime.on installed add listener. So this event just gets called whenever the extension gets installed. So you can do some initial setup. However, there are many, many other events that can get called inside of the background script. So for example, if your extension is getting suspended, or if you have permissions to listen to the tabs, you can get events for whenever someone creates a new tab, or when a window is removed or created, or you could even listen to like all of the key events in the browser. So you could create like a key listener that is listening to everything that someone types. So and you can look up what those are. There's also a lot of different APIs that you can call, as I mentioned. So here's just a screenshot of some of the APIs for Chrome.tabs. So we can get like what is currently selected in a tab. We can get what the current tab is. We can create a new tab. We can duplicate a tab. We can reload a tab or remove it. We can set the zoom settings. We can tell it to go forward or backward in its browsing history. There's quite a few things that we can do with the tab API. Additionally, there's like Chrome windows, which we can add or remove windows. We can adjust the focus of windows, and there's some events that go along with those. And again, these are just two of the APIs that you can access with an extension. There are many others. So as I mentioned before, a background script can make cross-site XML HTTP requests. I don't know if you would really call it cross-site, because there's no site associated with the background page for an extension. but you can send an XML HTTP request to any domain that you have specified in the permissions for the manifest. So you could potentially be connecting to any type of web server with or without the core's cross-site permissions enabled, which we've briefly discussed before. So you can use this as a way for doing like cross-site programming, and it bypasses the normal browser security around doing cross-site AJAX calls. So something though that you should be aware of is because you're doing that, there are reasons that those are in place. There are security risks with making, just AJAX calls to whatever particular site. And so you should be careful and make sure you think about like if there are any opportunities for something to like hijack your plugin, which I'll kind of get to that when we look at how extensions interact with particular pages. You could see potential for that. All right, so if you want to learn more about how background scripts work, there's a link to the page describing that on the extension documentation for Chrome. All right, so the UI for your extension is very simply, as I mentioned before, it's this icon along with this little pop-up window. And so all you have to do necessarily to specify this is just to use this what's called this browser action property in your manifest file, which specifies the default the icon for that UI here. These are just that icon at different resolutions. So the browsers have to be responsive and display properly on displays with different resolutions. So we specify icons with different resolutions. We can, and then there's a title, which I think is if you like hover over it, it shows the title for the extension. And then this option here, this default pop-up. So this actually specifies an HTML page, which will get loaded inside of this pop-up window. And so this can include our standard HTML elements. It can import images. It can import JavaScript, and it can be basically a fully functional little web page that functions inside of this pop-up window that your user can then interact with for your extension. So, and I'll get to how this piece interacts with the background script here in a second. I guess I blew through background script and extension UI and the UIs without really asking for questions. Does anyone have any questions so far about what's going on with the extensions? Okay. All right, so and if you want to learn more about how you control the user interface for an extension, you can look here. And again, these slides are available after class. Okay, and so now we're going to get into what are called content scripts, which I think are probably the most interesting part of extensions. So a content script is code that is injected directly into web pages running in your browser tabs. So whenever you typically develop a web page, that web page is loaded from a web server, and then it loads things like JavaScript from that web server to change its functionality. And generally, short of opening up the console and typing into it, there's not really anything anyone else can do to mess with that. However, if there's an extension installed on the browser, basically it has full access to say that to tell your website that, hey, I want you to run this JavaScript code. And that JavaScript code has full access to that page's DOM It has access to all of the JavaScript variables that are running on that site, as well as the CSS that's running on that site. And so you can pretty much hijack the entire web page and get it to change however you want. You can write your own JavaScript to like change the text that's there. You can write your own CSS, which changes how it all appears. You could write JavaScript that deletes the whole page and puts in your own page with put in something else. So there's a lot of possibility for what you can do with the content script. It's a very powerful tool that basically allows you to do anything that you want with a particular site that you have access to injecting content scripts on. So, and just to be clear, to contrast the content versus the background scripts of a page, content scripts are associated with a particular tab. They're actually code that are like running within a web page that you're viewing on a tab in a browser. Again, the background script is not running on a particular web page. It is just running in this sort of ephemeral background like instance in your browser that doesn't have a DOM. It doesn't have anything, any particular page that it's associated with. And these two things are separate. Content scripts don't have access to all of the APIs that I mentioned before. So you can't call the tabs API, you can't call the browsing history APIs from content scripts. You can pretty much only call code that you normally would within like a typical website JavaScript file, with some small exceptions, which I'll get to. So, right, and background scripts have full access to the API. And background scripts can't access the DOM. Only content scripts can. Okay. So how do you actually inject content scripts into a web page? So there's a couple ways of doing it. The first is to, within your manifest file, you can specify a property called content scripts, which is an array of several objects. And within each of those objects, I can say, all right, so for pages that match this URL pattern, so this is like a very limited regex, I believe. You just have like the wildcard options here. So for this case, it would be like any subdomain and any path on NewYorkTimes.com. So on any page that matches that, I can specify any CSS files that I want to inject into that site, and I can specify any JavaScript files that I want to inject into that site. And so again, once those pages load from New York Times, they'll basically also add my CSS and my JavaScript, which can then interact with the page as if it was a native CSS or JavaScript file.
I had a question.
For that website. Yeah, Ramon.
So, for example, those CSS files they override the current CSS files, or how does like the I want to say like the power work between two CSS files?
So I think the way that it works is that they get loaded up. So we've talked about sort of how the cascading works with the others. Salim might correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they show up. Basically, they are loaded after the other CSS files for a web page, and so they would take priority over the ones that are specified already on the page. And so you could override like the typical CSS rules for the page, just because I think that they get loaded afterwards.
Okay, I see.
And yeah, so you can define different content scripts to load on different pages. So you can change the matches option here so if I want to say also load a particular script on YouTube, then I could put in a pattern to match those domains and specify CSS and JavaScript that would get loaded on those pages instead of the ones that I would be running on, like the New York Times, for example, here. All right. Additionally, you can just programmatically inject code into particular tabs that are running particular web pages. So using the tabs API from the background script, I could just say chrome.tabs execute script, and I can actually just give it a string that is code that I want to execute on that particular page, and it would just execute. I can also give it a particular JavaScript or CSS file that I want to run in the tab. So in this case, where I'm saying just chrome.tabs execute script is running it on the active tab. If I want to run it on a particular tab, I can go and use the tabs API to look up what tab I'm particularly interested in, and I can pass a tab ID into this function, and it would run the code on that particular tab and not just the one that is currently open. So yeah, and this way you can, if you don't want to always run a content script on a page, you can just do it this way to just do it programmatically. Say if someone if someone interacted with your like the pop-up for your browser, the UI, and they like pressed a button, then you could use that to generate an event that would like inject content script into a page. Right, so if you want to learn more about how content scripts work, you can look at this page here. All right, and finally, we're going to look at message passing. So we've talked about quite a few of these different components for an extension. So we talked about content scripts, which are running on particular pages, background scripts, which are just running in this like ephemeral background environment in the browser, as well as this pop-up .html file that, or whatever the browser action file is for your extension, which is an HTML file, which can also import its own JavaScript. So all of these different pieces of your extension are separate code environments. They don't share variables. They can't just call functions within one another. These are all in separate environments that don't necessarily touch each other. And so in order to sort of coordinate all of these and make all of them interact and do things, we have to actually use message passing. So this is very similar to like what we've done with like how I would think about sending messages with Socket.io. So we can think about all these different parts of the extensions as basically separately executing programs. And if we want them to do things in a coordinated way, then we have to send messages between them. It's not going over the network in this case. It's basically just messages getting passed around within the Chrome environment. So there's a little bit less overhead involved there, but it basically still is like a form of like inter-process communication. So this is just some code examples of how you would go about sending messages between the different pieces. So if I was a content script and I wanted to send a message to the background script, or potentially also even the browser action page, the UI, I could do chrome.runtime send message. So I give it an object which represents the message, and that's what goes through to the other program. And then I also have a callback here for a response. And if I were a background script and I wanted to say send a message to a content script running on a particular page for my extension, I would have to look up one of the, like a tab that I wanted to send it to that was running one of my content scripts. And then I would call chrome.tabs.send message. And then I would specify a tab ID I want to send it to, the message object, which is just greeting hello here. And then again, I would have a callback for a response object. So these are how you would send the message. You can send messages both in the background script and content scripts. So as I mentioned before, content scripts can't access the Chrome API directly, but what they can do is they can send and receive messages from the background script, which is then executing code that is calling these APIs. All right, so And then if you want to receive a message either in the background script or in the content script, you would say chrome.runtime on message add listener, which then gives you a callback, which would send you, which would give you the request, which would just be this object that's getting sent here along with the sender, which could be a tab, it could be some other entity within the extension. And then there, it gives you a callback call for sending a response. So here, I'm doing some quick code to check to see if I got this message from a tab or from the background script of the extension, and I can change my response based on that. And then, so generally, if you think back to about how we sent messages with Socket.io, we used a different message name in Socket.io, which was just like a string that got sent along with the object. We don't necessarily have that here. We just are sending objects. So we do need to like write our own checks to basically see what kind of message it is. And so if we had like 10 different messages, then you might just have like a string of like if else's or what type of message it is. So in this case, we're just checking to see if it's a request.greeting or if request.greeting equals hello, in which case we just send a response that says farewell, goodbye, which is we're printing out here in the callbacks for this message. So this is sort of like the bare bones message sending. Again, you're sending just JavaScript objects through. So that could be as complicated or complex data structure as you wanted to send through the message. You can also establish more long-lived message passing connections between particular tabs and the background script or the UI. These are called ports. These work more like I would think with like the WebSockets with Socket.io, where it's sort of like an established dedicated channel. But I'm not going to go into the details here of how those work. You can also send messages to other extensions. So if you're coordinating with another extension or another set of extensions, you can actually send messages to those extensions and get them back. This is all done by extension ID. So every extension is going to have its own unique ID, and then you can use those IDs to basically send messages back and forth between the different extensions. It's also possible for the JavaScript on a particular web page to send messages to extensions. It doesn't necessarily have to be a content script. If a web page is aware of an extension potentially being installed and has the ID for that extension, then it can try to send a message to that extension and as well as receive messages from that extension. So you can write web pages that assume that an extension is already installed and then interact with it. All right. Yeah. Oh, but to enable that, you basically, I think you have to write into your manifest some permissions that permit receiving messages from particular web pages. I think you can't just, any web page, I think, can't just talk with your extension. You have to explicitly allow it, I believe. If you want to learn more about messaging, you can look here. Okay, does anyone have any questions about messaging? I know it's a little bit, it adds a bit of overhead to writing these things, but it's really just to keep all the pieces of your code separate and probably provide for, just another layer of security on top of this so that, it's less easy to hijack your extension to do things that you don't want it to. So you could think, for example, you could have a page that could assume that there is a content script running on it, and then it could use that. It could try to like trigger code that was in that content script to like send messages to your background page to go like try to send messages to the background service and try to either load up different pages that it shouldn't be or things like that. Try to get the extension to make cross-site requests that you don't want it to make, etc. But anyone have any questions about the overall structure? So at this point, we're gonna have some demos. I asked to put some demos together, but I couldn't answer any questions if you have them now. Okay, so Salim's going to run some extension demos. I think he has like 5 different demo extensions that he's going to try to run through. Salim, you want to share your screen and take it from here?
Yeah. Is it visible to everybody?
I don't think so.
Okay, so now, what about now?
Yeah, it's coming up now.
Okay, so I'm going to cover like 5 different extensions. Each one has different capability. So I will start by the extension called Hello World extension. As we mentioned earlier, let me delete this file. So importantly, you have to have one directory. So in my case, I call this directory Hello World extension. You can have it. You can give it any name you want. Then you have to start from your manifest.json. In my case, it's very simple. Is it visible, Professor? The manifest?
No, it's not visible right
so
now.
So I have to keep. Okay, let me see. So how I can change this?
Are you sharing like a particular window, or are you sharing like your desktop?
Oh, let me see. Stop sharing share. So I'm sharing, I think, particular window. So
yeah, you might just share the whole desktop if you're going to be swapping between screens a lot.
Okay. Let's do this, I think. Is my desktop shared right now?
Yeah, you can see it right now.
Okay, so I have the manifest right now, the JSON. So I have 3 files. The first one is the manifest.json. The other one is, I call it hello.html, and the icon I have. So if we take a look at the manifest.json, I have different fields in the manifest.json. The first one is the name of the extension I have. You can give it any name you want. So I call it Hello World extension. And I added between parentheses name, just to show you where this field will be reflected when I deploy the extension. Then I have a description field. This is also customized. You can add whatever you want here. So I just call this is my first extension. Again, I have between parentheses a keyword. I added description just to show you where you will be seeing this particular string. Then I have what's called version. If I have a plan to issue like multiple versions of my extension, so I just can give it like this version is version 1. Then if I think of adding more capabilities to my extension in the future, I can give it like I can change this one later in the future to 2 or maybe 1.1. It's up to you. The fourth field I have in my manifest is called manifest _ version. So this is set by Google, by Chrome right now, which is 2. You cannot have any other value other than 2 until Google changes it. The type of the extension that I'm going to make is called browser action extension. There is other types of extensions that you can create. Browser action, and there is another one, page action, and you can have also background extensions.
Salim, can you increase the font size on Notepad++? I think some people are having trouble reading it.
Oh, okay. Is it good right now?
I think so.
Okay. So yeah, so the browser action is one type of extensions, but there is another one is called page action, and there is one more is called background extensions, where usually they are used for like automation without like interaction from the user. So this is my manifest. So my manifest will tell Chrome browser, what to do once it's installed. I have also my Hello HTML. I will show you where we'll be using this. So my Hello HTML is a very basic HTML page. It has only one title. It says Hello World extension, and I also added like between parentheses HTML page just to show you where these pieces are gonna go after I deploy my extension. So let me open these things next to each other, so make it easy. And I have an icon as well. So I have it. You can declare the icon that you want here. So default icon is called Hello Extensions.png, and it's the same name as here. You could have, like, as the browser mentioned the slides, you could have a bunch of icons that you want, and you can decide which one that you want to use as a default icon. Now, going to to deployment. To deploy your extension, you have to type Chrome //extensions. Then you will see this page. In this page, you have to activate at the beginning developer mode. Then you have to click Load Unpacked. So if I click Load Unpacked, it's going to ask me which extension I want to deploy. So I have this Hello World extension. So this is why we need all your files to be in one folder. So I have Hello World extension. I choose it. Then I click Select Folder. It's going to take everything loaded to my extensions. So this is my extension. Previously, I showed you where each part will be visible. So if you notice here, I said hello, the name is Hello World extension, parentheses name. So it's gonna be shown here. And the icon I have for my extension is this little "hi", and you see here the name of the extension. So name field will be reflected here, and will be reflected if you highlight, if you hover over the icon of your extension. Regarding the description that I decided to be here, so it's going to be shown here in this part. And finally, if I click in this icon, I will get this Hello World extension. So this text Hello World extension came from the HTML page that is shown here. So this is a very minimal extension that shows you, I mean, like different pieces. So how to import the icon, how to use the pop-up, this is called pop-up window, and that's it. So this is very minimal. This is super easy. I don't know if you guys have any question. If not, I can go to the next extension. Okay. So one of the things that you have to notice, I mean, I don't know if I have it here. Sometimes if you have any issue with your extension, you will get here a button called error or errors. So this means that there is a problem in your extension and you have to fix it. So you have to click here in that button. Let me maybe, if I change, let me click here. Okay, so now before I continue, one of the things that you have to do is whenever you make any changes here, it's not going to be reflected immediately. What you have to do is you have to go back to Chrome extensions and you refresh or update the extension. So if I change this, let's say just hello without HTML, and I save it, this is not going to be reflected. But if I click here, yeah, see, so it's good. It says reloaded. I think it's visible to everyone. If I click again here, I have a problem. So the problem here is this file does not exist, which is hello. It should be .html. So this is one way to debug your code, is like either from here or with the errors button that you will be seeing. So this is the one of the extensions I have. If no questions, I will go to the next one. Okay, let me visit the next one. So the second extension I have, I will remove this one. Just, I think I have all of them the same name, so for the sake of confusion, I will take it out. So remove. So this is how you remove your extensions, by clicking and remove. The second extension I have is called adding content script extension. So just to recall what we have mentioned before, we have, so the professor talked about like how the way that you can have your content script embedded in your web page. And the thing that you have to notice here, so the professor mentioned 2 ways to inject a content script. One of them is called declarative way, which is this way, where you have to write about it in your manifest.json, and the other way is programmatically, and I have another example for that one. So my content script is very easy. It's very simple, sorry. So what I have here is, I'm saying just like print this line running from content script. This is a way I like to debug my code. Like for example, this statement, this line of code console.log is printed from my content script. This way I can know like that my content script is visible or accessible by my extension. And the other thing I said here, change the background color for the web page I'm seeing to orange. So the professor said that content script have access to the DOM elements of the web page. So I'm accessing the DOM element right now by saying, okay, just change the background to be orange. Other things that you can do, for example, here, what I'm doing is, in this example, I'm saying, okay, go get me all the titles that have this tag h3. I think this is something we have done like earlier in this semester, where you can select the elements from your web page. So here I'm saying, okay, go get me all the elements that all the tags that has that's called h3. Then I'm looping all like over all these titles, and I'm just changing them. At the first line, I'm just printing the text, and then I'm changing the background color to be blue. So this is, again, this is my content script. I'm injecting this in any page. I'm saying here matches all URLs, so it's going to be embedded everywhere. And I still have hello, which is the same pop-up window that we have seen before. It's just like hello world extension. This is my manifest, and this is my content script. Let us upload this one or deploy this one and show you what is the effect. So if, again, make sure the developer mode is on, then you go load impact. I will be choosing adding content script extension, then select folder. So it's here, no problems, that's fine. But so if I click here, let's go maybe CNN news. So yeah, see, so I just said before, like, so this orange came from this line, because this embed, the way that's embedded is it is embedded like automatically. I'm saying match all URLs, and down there I said like every title make it blue in this line. So as you have seen, every h3 is not every title, but every h3 element is like gonna be blue. Is a bad choice for color, but just for the sake of explanation. Yeah, so this is like automatic injection. We still get like hello world if we need to do something here. Like for example, you could have a form here. You could have like text, input text, and you could have some buttons. It depends on the purpose of your extension. But like any questions about this? Any questions in this about how to inject like content script? I didn't change anything in this part except I added like the content script. It's important to have like sometimes some mistakes that you might do in the in your manifest, like for example, forgetting such commas here. So you have to have like, I mean, each field should be separated from the other one by a comma. So as you notice here, maybe, and here, and so on. Any questions about this one?
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is it possible the page don't automatically change the color after by pushing the button, the high, they change the color?
Yeah, so I have in the next examples, I have another example where you can inject this code programmatically. So you don't change the color except until you press this button here in this icon. So so also depends. Like for example, here I said for all URLs, which means any website should be, I mean, for any website, I'm saying here, just inject this code. Okay. And by the way, if you have multiple scripts, it's gonna be injected like in order. So if you have them like, if you want to inject like multiple scripts here, let's say script 1, script 2, script 3. So the order is important if you are using functions from other scripts.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go to the other extension I have. I'm gonna remove it again because, like I said, they have the same name. Close everything and remove it. Okay. So the third example I have, like content script programmatically, and the only difference, if you guys notice, I don't have the content script here. So this part is similar to the previous one. I don't have content script because I'm gonna do this programmatically. And the way that I did it here is I have two, like I have one more file, which is background. I'm gonna mention, I'll explain why I need this one. So let me open this. And I open my script, content script. So there is no change in my content script except sending message. So in this example, I'm explaining two things. The first one is like I'm sending messages. So this example add two things to the previous example. Here I'm sending messages using send message, and I'm listening to this message. And the other one is I'm injecting the script programmatically. So let us explain it. So for regarding the sending messages, so I'm sending, if you guys notice, this is the content script file. I'm sending message from content script. So let's leave this part away a little bit. So in the manifest, just let us focus on the sending messages. So I said in my content script, Chrome runtime.send message. So these are keywords. So so it is all reserved words. So you cannot like play around with it. My message here is it has so creating is a variable name. You can have whatever you want here. You can say X, Y, Z, whatever, and this is the value. And I have a callback function, which this callback function will be executed once my message has been sent to the background script. In the background script, I'm saying, okay, on message, Chrome runtime on message add listen. So it's in the background. This part of code is listening to the messages, and I have this function that will be executed right away once a message is received. So this function says, okay, whenever you receive a message, execute this function. This function will print from content script, which is this one. I'm just like, I kept this string just to tell you that we received the message from content script, and I have the sender tab.url. So the sender tab.url is the way that you print like how to access like different components of your message. So your message is not just the message; it has a bunch of other stuff. Like for example, here the sender. You can have the sender.tab.url. You could have the tab ID. In some applications, you might end up having using the tab ID. And at the same time, like the way that I'm accessing my message, since this is so the request is this. So request hold the message, but how I can access it. So creating the same variable that I used here, I should be using here. Like I said, you can change it to X or Y or whatever. So I'm saying if my message is hello, send response, reply creating. So this hi, so this is again, reply creating is another variable. It's from my own. You can, like I said, name it whatever you want, and it has the value hi. So this hi should go back again to this line of code, which is like sorry, it should go back to this callback function and execute this line. So response that reply creating. So you have to have like these two variables match each other. This is the consistency is important in when you are like exchanging messages. So this is about messaging. The other component that I added in this extension, which is an event. So right now, before we injected automatically the script, but not the content script. But now I want to inject the content script programmatically. So now you can use this line of code. So I'm saying at the beginning, Chrome.browser action, which is my extension type, is browser action type. On a clicked, add listener, which means whenever I click the icon, this event will be triggered. So the icon that I have for my extension, once it's clicked, this event will be triggered. So once this event will be triggered, this line of code will be executed automatically. So I'm saying Chrome.tabs.execute script. So this part, again, these are keywords. You have to like train yourself or like learn about them from the links that the professor provided in the lecture, in the slides. So you can. So in this case, I'm saying, okay, go find this file. So right now I have file. The professor have also another example in the slide where you can write the lines of code directly here instead of having them in a file called content script. So it depends. Like if you have too many things that you want to do, it's better to have them in a file like I have here. If you need just to print like, I mean, to execute 2 or 3 lines, it's about readability. And the tag, the field name here instead of file, this is also reserved, or you should be code. If you remember from the slide. So now again, this event will be triggered, like I said, once I click the icon here, the extension icon. Let's upload the extension or deploy the extension and see how it's going to work. Oh, so one more thing is this extension needs an access to the active tab. So this is how the permissions. So because I want to execute this script, which means I want to execute this script on this tab. When I click the browser extension, I want this content script to be executed in this current tab. To make this available, I mean, you should have like a permission. Without permissions, you will end up having problems, or your extension will not be executed. You might have some errors here. I'm not sure, but like it will not be executed until you give it the permissions. And regarding background script, also, like we said before, your manifest will tell the story about your extension to the Chrome browser. So you have to tell explicitly in your manifest which script you are using as background script. So these are like fields, like background and script, but this you can give it any name you want. I mean, I just use background just for simplicity, but you can use any name you want. Let's deploy the extension and see how it's going to behave. Web programming, select folder. If I refresh again, nothing executed. Before this, the execution of that script was automatically, but if I click in high, everything will be executed because this event get triggered when I said Chrome. After I clicked here in the extension, it says Chrome browser extension action, browser action, only clicked add listener. So it was listening to my click. If I click forever, it's gonna be executed again and again and again. And by the way, I mean, one of the things that I didn't open here, like if we go to inspect, we should be able to see some of the messages that I have here. So if you guys remember, I said in here in my content script, I want to print all the titles. So I have all the titles, which are like CNN breaking news. Then I have US, then I have latest news and all this stuff. And if we notice, so when we send the message here to the content, when we receive the message from the content script, so we said we want to send back hi. So this hi it will be shown here. So this is the high, because this is content script. So whatever printed here should be printed in this page. If we go to the background page, see in the background page here, I can see this line is executed because this is background script. So any print statement that you will have in your background script, it will be shown by clicking background page here, as we see from content script. And this is the URL, which is the sender.tab.url, which is this URL. So I did two things mainly in this example, which is like sending messages and with variables, and I received these messages. And I mean, just to remind you, you have to have consistency in the variables names when it comes to checking messages. Messages could be numbers. This is just text, but it could be numbers. You could send, like, for example, you could like execute scripts. For example, this line could be executed once you receive a specific message here down there. Like, instead of sending response, you could have execute script. It depends on the functionality that you want to have in your extension. Any questions?
So can you just demo like debugging the background page? Like, could you like throw a breakpoint into like the message handler, just so that students can see like how you would debug the background page?
Okay, so let's see. Sorry. Do you want like something like this maybe? Let's see.
I think you'd have to put it like on line number 9, I think, in that case.
Oh yeah, okay. So let's see, execute it again. No, that number.
You might have to do it on a new page, I'm not sure.
Okay, let me close this maybe.
Or I mean, like you might have to open a different tab and try to.
Okay. Maybe. I mean, to remind the students, I mean, see here, there's nothing executed because we just executed the extension on this particular page. We have to click again here and execute this.
Yeah, so you can see here where he's received the message from the content script that was running on this page after it got injected, and you can see information about the sender if you just like highlight over that, and you know, if you press continue, it'll go ahead and send the message back to the tab. So. Yeah, and again, if you want to debug this, you go to Chrome://extensions and then click on the background page for the. For this extension.
Any questions? Any questions?
I think you might just have time for one more, Salim. Yeah,
I have this, the last one I want to show. Previously, the professor was talking about this Blacka, Add Black Plus. I think it's the same one, right, Professor? Yeah. So you could build your own. Like in my case, I have I created them extension called Skip Ads. This is very simple. Skip ads. Oh, before I continue, I have one thing I forgot to mention, which is it's a good practice to split your files. Like in the previous extensions I have, just like 2 files or 3 files, like here, like 2 or 3 files. But it's a good practice if you can split the files into organize them in folders. For example, here I have the source code, I have the icons, and within the source code, you can also split if you have multiple background script or if you have multiple content scripts. I just call it inject, but you can call it any content script or whatever. So, I mean, you could have them in this way. To show you this ad blocker, hopefully is going to work, because sometimes, you know, so this is meant to, let me see, I don't have it installed, I think. Let me move this one at the beginning real quick. If I go to YouTube, for example, here, yeah, I think we have some videos. So here in YouTube, one of the things that you guys notice, I mean, there is a skip ad. If there is ad, it's going to be played before the video starts. So one of the things that you can do is you can make automatic click for that skip ad. Let me show you at the beginning the files I have. So I want, in this extension, I want my ad blocker, that the custom one that I created, just to be executed in YouTube. So just to confirm what the professor was saying, you can specify the URL that you want. So I said here, I just need my extension to run on YouTube, and that's it. Regarding the JavaScript files, I have them here in order. Like I told you before, if you want to have like more than one, you have to have them in order. And this example, we are going to use some jQuery and the script I have. This jQuery file, it's found online. You can download it. And I think this is the recent version of this jQuery file. And I have my inject. So, I mean, the stuff I have made, you will be seeing the code I wrote it just in inject. Let me show you that inject. So in this inject is a little bit have like one more concept that we need, more than what we knew before. So here I declared 3 variables. These are like custom names. I mean, whatever you want. So this is called wait for skip button. And I'm using here what's called a set interval function. This set interval function is gonna keep running or calling, sorry, this function every 1 second. So this is like how often you want this function to be run. So when you said 1000, I think it's 1 second. So every 1 second, this this function will be called. So as you see here. So this is skip function. Actually, I'm doing very simple thing. And it's functional. What's happening? So I'm taking I'm selecting the skip button. So, I mean, I don't have it here, but like once you have a skip button here, you just can click over there and inspect. Once you see the skip button, you have the issue is sometimes like YouTube, they have different selectors for different buttons. So even though it's a skip ad, but it still have like different. So in my case, I inspected like 2 buttons. They have different selectors. So this one is a skip ad, and this one also skip ad. Is both of them, I mean, are generated here by YouTube to my account. So in my case, what I'm doing is just I'm selecting them. So what's happening every 1 second, I'm calling this function. In this function, I'm trying to find button 1 or button 2. If button 1 is found, I'm just like making kind of a trick. I'm saying, okay, if it is not null, go get like the value of its text, because sometimes there's button, but there is no text. This is something I face, but this should not be an ideal case. Then when I say, okay, once there is a text, which means it is written explicitly, is a skip ad, okay? So if it is not undefined, which means there is a button, go click this button for me. Now to stop calling this function, you have to clear your interval, like we did here, set interval. This function here is kind of reversing what's happening in step interval. Now I'm clearing my interval. This means this function will not be called anymore. So it's going to be called every 1 second until I click the skip ad is clicked. Otherwise, it will keep calling this function again and again and again. And the same, I have, if you guys notice, sometimes you have a pop-up window here, small pop-up window. that show you an ad and with little X in the corner to close it. So the same, I have like other functions to check for it. So it depends, like, I mean, I'm doing the same functionality. I'm just repeating the same function kind of. I'm selecting, you know, that particular X mark that appear here somehow. Then I say, okay, just go click it, and that's it. So I'm kind of automating the click on the skip ad and the X mark. Yeah, and other stuff like it depends on the ads that will be shown in your page. So this is what I'm doing in this function. But actually, step interval is a really good thing. Sometimes what's happening if you want to select one of the DOM objects in your page, and you have, like, suppose you are executing, let's say, this line in your content script. But the problem, sometimes you have weak internet connection, sometimes slow internet connection, sometimes you have the object takes forever to come back. So instead of getting an error on your console here, instead of getting errors here, sorry, here errors that says, okay, this object is not found, or this element does not exist. So what you can do is just you can do set interval. Like instead of keep clicking or trying to click, you know, this button, you can just like say set interval, then clear it. So I'm waiting for that element to be generated. I don't know if you guys have any question. I mean, deployment is the same. In my browser, kind of rarely I found ads, but sometimes there is unskippable ads, so I see it, you know. Any questions regarding this extension?
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be, and feel free to ask a question. And just, I mean, I feel like extensions are oftentimes a fairly overlooked like web tool that you can use in addition to things like web pages, servers, that kind of thing. Extensions are actually pretty powerful little pieces of code. So you're not required to make one or anything for an assignment or the final project, but I wanted to expose you to what they are and how they work a little bit, just in case you had a project in the future or a need for something like this. But with that said, we'll hang around for questions, but I think that's pretty much it for today. So, all right.